When people think about the fall of Rome, they usually picture barbarians at the gates, collapsing legions, or emperors being ousted through palace intrigue. But great empires don't collapse solely from external blows. The main destruction usually comes from within, and in the most insidious way, money. Rome didn't fall just because of invasions, nor solely because of corruption. The real reason began with the devaluation of its currency. And the lessons drawn from that monetary collapse still hold true today for any modern economy that thinks it can print its way out of trouble. Let's rewind a bit. For centuries, Rome's economy was anchored by the silver denarius. First minted around 211 BC, this coin was almost entirely pure silver and was trusted both within and beyond the empire. Roman soldiers were paid in it, merchants demanded it, and the populace stored their wealth in it. The denarius wasn't just a means of payment, it was tangible security and value in your hand. The coin's worth and the empire's strength were tightly intertwined. As long as people trusted Rome, they naturally trusted its money. But running an empire isn't cheap. Paying the legions, maintaining roads and aqueducts, and financing long, continuous wars. By the 2nd century AD, Rome was under immense financial pressure, simultaneously defending against northern Germanic tribes, Eastern Parthians, and internal uprisings that threatened stability. Taxes simply could not cover these massive military expenditures. The emperors turned to a familiar but dangerous tactic, debasing the currency. Instead of collecting higher taxes, which always brought complaints and unrest, they began reducing the silver content in the denarius. The numbers tell the story. In the early imperial period under Augustus, the denarius contained about 95% pure silver. By the early 3rd century, during Caracalla's reign, that figure had dropped to 50%. By the mid-3rd century, in Gallienus's time, the silver content had fallen below 5%. A coin that had once been solid metal had now become a bronze piece barely coated in silver. The people could see the difference with their eyes and feel it with their hands. The result was inevitable. Inflation skyrocketed. When money lost its real value, prices soared. A measure of wheat that could once be bought for a single denarius now cost dozens. This wasn't some abstract concept from economics textbooks. It was a tangible reality that shattered daily life. Soldiers demanded higher pay to cover rising living costs. Merchants refused to accept the devalued coins, opting instead for gold or direct barter. Local economies reverted to trade by exchange because no trusted currency remained. And as confidence eroded, emperors minted even more debased coins, hoping that sheer volume could replace lost value. A vicious cycle ensued, the same pattern repeated in every major inflation crisis throughout history. This crisis reached its peak during the so-called crisis of the 3rd century, from 235 to 284 AD. Rome endured nearly 50 years of invasions, plagues, civil wars, and economic collapse. Emperors changed so rapidly that some lasted only a few months. From the outside, political chaos was visible. But behind the scenes, the real problem was a broken financial system. Taxes were continually demanded in devalued coins. Farmers abandoned their lands out of desperation. Trade routes and production networks fractured. The Roman government took desperate measures, from price ceilings to forced labor, to keep the system afloat. None of it worked. Emperor Diocletian was among the first major leaders to attempt to patch the wound. In 301 AD, he issued the famous Edict on Maximum Prices, fixing prices for thousands of goods and services, from grain to wages. Violators faced death. But the edict turned into an utter disaster. Prices cannot be stabilized by law when money itself has lost its value. The black market boomed, and official trade nearly stopped. The people quickly learned a harsh truth. You cannot fix a broken monetary system with a decree. Eventually, Rome was forced to abandon the denarius entirely. Constantine the Great introduced the gold solidus around 312 AD, a coin that provided stability for centuries in the Eastern Roman Empire. But for the Western Empire, it was far too late. Debasement had already hollowed out Rome's economic foundation. Armies became unsustainable, trade collapsed, and societal trust vanished. The fall of Rome wasn't a single blow. It was the result of years of unraveling, and monetary collapse was one of its most visible threads. Rome's story doesn't end there. History never stops teaching this lesson. Every major inflation crisis since then has followed the same pattern. Governments dilute currency to cover expenses. The wealthy protect themselves with real assets, and ordinary people gradually become poorer. Rome's currency crisis was merely the first warning, a blueprint for collapse. Fast forward to the modern world, and the echoes are striking. After World War I, Germany faced astronomical reparations imposed by the Treaty of Versailles. The government printed money to meet its obligations, much like Rome had once minted more and more debased coins. By 1923, inflation had completely spiraled out of control. A loaf of bread that had cost 1 mark before the war now sold for 200 billion marks in the fall of that year. People transported their wages home not in bags, but in wheelbarrows. Pensioners saw their life savings vanish overnight, while those with factories, land, or foreign currency grew even wealthier. So with money rendered meaningless, economic despair set the stage for Hitler's rise. The same scenario repeated in Zimbabwe in the 2000s. Land seizures, collapsing production, and growing debts pushed the government to the same easy solution: printing money. By 2008, inflation reached an annual rate of 89.76 stillion%, a number that boggles the mind. Prices almost doubled daily. Shops couldn't keep up with changing price tags. Eventually, Zimbabwe abandoned its currency entirely, forcing citizens to transact in US dollars or South African rand. Once again, a government thought it could cheat reality. Once again, the people paid the price. But don't be fooled by these extreme cases. Even in developed economies today, the Roman model quietly persists. Take the United States. In 1971, President Nixon completely removed the dollar from the gold standard, severing the last tangible link between currency and value. From that moment, the dollar became entirely fiat money, a currency whose value rests solely on people's trust in the government. And just like in Rome, the temptation to spend beyond means became irresistible. Over the following decades, debt ballooned, the money supply expanded, and inflation became a persistent pressure. We may not be hauling cash in wheelbarrows, but we all feel our purchasing power slowly eroding. $1 in 1971 now barely buys what $6 would today. The paper looks the same, the bills look the same, but the value has been hollowed out and devalued. The tactic governments use is always the same. They present inflation as growth. They want us to feel prosperity when wages rise, even though costs rise faster. They package debt as investment, even though most of it is consumption. They tout rise in stock markets as wealth, while the majority of the population owns little or no shares. There's no difference from Roman emperors saying everything is fine, only now it comes in a modern wrapper. What makes today dangerous is that this system operates on a global scale. Rome's collapse affected only one empire. Weimar's inflation hit one nation. Zimbabwe's crisis was local. But today, the entire world runs on fiat currencies, massive debts, and central banks ready to print trillions at the first sign of crisis. This means the next major shock won't just hit one country, it could shake the entire globe. And as history repeatedly shows, the ones who pay the price won't be the wealthy elites, but the millions living on wages, pensions, and savings. So what should we, as individuals, learn from all this? The lesson from Rome's currency crisis is clear and has stood the test of millennia. First, inflation does not happen by accident. It is a choice, a quiet, invisible tax. A mechanism that has quietly eroded empires from within for 2,000 years. Second, Real wealth isn't found in the numbers on paper or a screen. True value lies in what survives when money collapses: land, skills, productive businesses, resources. Things tangible and lasting. Third, never forget how fragile stability really is. If you told a Roman in the 1st century, one day your money will be worthless, they would have laughed. In Germany in 1913, telling someone soon you'll need wheelbarrows to carry money would have been dismissed outright. In 1980 Zimbabwe, people expected prosperity after independence. No one imagined their money would soon be worth less than toilet paper. Yet, in every case, the ending was the same. Rome's story reminds us that financial systems collapse slowly at first, then suddenly, with speed. When trust evaporates, everything unravels. When money loses its reality, society begins to fall apart. Contracts fail, trade halts, armies dissolve, governments lose legitimacy. Barbarians at the gate may deliver the final blow, but the true destruction starts long before, silently, inside the treasury. And here's the punchline, perhaps the most striking part. History doesn't repeat itself exactly, but if you fail to understand it, it will wallop you anyway. Rome's currency crisis wasn't just about bad rulers or greedy elites. It was a lesson about how fragile money becomes when power misuses it. And that fragility is still right at the center of our lives today. If this text has given you a new perspective or expanded your horizon, don't forget to subscribe. History always provides answers, and I'll continue to show you where to find them, helping shine a light on your own path.